The crack of gunfire echoed through the dusty streets of Redemption Creek as Olivia Randall pressed her back against the rough wooden wall of the Silver Dollar Saloon, her hands trembling as they cradled the swell of her belly. Tears streaked clean paths through the dust on her cheeks, her breath coming in ragged gasps as she slid down to sit in the dirt of the alley. 6 months pregnant, alone, and now hunted, she had nowhere left to run in this unforgiving frontier town of 1876. The sound of heavy boots crunching on gravel made her freeze, her heart pounding wildly against her ribs. She squeezed her eyes shut, praying whoever approached would pass by without noticing her huddled form in the shadows. "Madam." The voice was deep but gentle, carrying a hint of a southern drawl. Olivia's eyes flew open to see a tall man standing at the mouth of the alley, his broad shoulders silhouetted against the setting sun. His face was partially shadowed by the brim of his worn leather hat, but she could make out a strong jaw covered in days-old stubble. "Please," she whispered, unable to stop the fresh tears that spilled over. "Please just leave me be." Instead of leaving, the stranger stepped closer, and Olivia could now see him clearly, a cowboy in his early 30s, with piercing green eyes that seemed to see right through her. He wore dusty trail clothes, a bandana loose around his neck, and a gun belt slung low on his hips. "You're in trouble," he said. It wasn't a question. Olivia nodded, too exhausted to lie. "They'll find me soon." "The men who—" Her voice broke as her hand moved protectively over her unborn child. The cowboy's gaze followed the movement, his expression softening as he understood her condition. Then his eyes hardened as he looked toward the street, where angry voices could be heard calling out her name. He crouched down beside her, meeting her gaze directly. "Who are they?" "Men who work for Harold Jenkins, the railroad baron. She swallowed hard. "He promised to marry me, but when I told him about the baby, he said I was lying, that it couldn't be his. Now he wants me gone before his wife arrives from Boston next week." The shouts grew louder, and Olivia trembled, terror washing over her. The cowboy rose to his full height, his hand resting on his revolver as he positioned himself between Olivia and the alley entrance. His voice, when he spoke, held a steel resolve that made her breath catch. "Then I'll stand between you and the world, madam," he said simply. "You don't even know me," Olivia whispered, stunned by this stranger's willingness to protect her. He glanced down at her with the faintest hint of a smile. "Name's Victor Northwood. Now I know you and you know me." Before Olivia could respond, 3 men appeared at the alley entrance, each armed and wearing the distinct blue vests of Jenkins' private security force. The leader, a bull-necked man with a pockmarked face, spotted Victor and sneered. "Step aside, cowboy. Our business is with the woman." Victor didn't move. "Seems to me the lady doesn't want your company." "That ain't for you to decide," the man growled, his hand hovering near his pistol. "Jenkins pays good money to make sure his problems disappear." "Is that what she is? A problem?" Victor's voice remained calm, but Olivia could see the tension in his shoulders. "She's carrying what she claims is Jenkins' bastard. His wife's arriving soon and he don't need this kind of trouble. Now move aside." Victor's stance widened slightly. "No." The standoff stretched for several heartbeats. Olivia held her breath, certain she was about to witness bloodshed on her account. 3 against 1, cowboy," the leader warned. Victor shrugged. "I've faced worse odds." What happened next unfolded so quickly that Olivia could barely follow it. As the leader went for his gun, Victor drew with lightning speed, firing once. The man dropped with a howl, clutching his shooting arm. The other 2 hesitated, and Victor leveled his smoking gun at them. "Take your friend and tell Jenkins something for me," Victor said, his voice deadly quiet. "Tell him the lady is under my protection now. If he sends anyone else, I won't aim for the arm." The men exchanged nervous glances, then helped their wounded companion to his feet and backed away, cursing under their breath. When they were gone, Victor holstered his weapon and turned to Olivia, extending his hand to help her up. "Can you walk?" she nodded, placing her trembling hand in his calloused one, allowing him to gently pull her to her feet. "Why?" she asked. "Why would you risk your life for someone you don't know?" Victor's expression was unreadable as he looked down at her. "My ma raised me to believe that how a man treats those who can't protect themselves tells you everything you need to know about him." He glanced at her swollen belly. "And there's 2 lives here that need protecting." Olivia felt fresh tears welling in her eyes, but these were different tears of gratitude and the first faint stirrings of hope she'd felt in months. "We can't stay here," Victor continued, keeping his voice low. "Jenkins has too many men in town. I've got a camp set up about 2 miles outside Redemption Creek. It's not much, but it's safe. Can you ride?" "Yes," Olivia said, straightening her shoulders with newfound determination. "I grew up on a ranch in Colorado. I can ride." Victor nodded, looking faintly impressed. "Good. We'll wait until dark, then slip out the back way. Jenkins and his men will be watching the main roads." As the last light of day faded from the sky, Olivia found herself following this mysterious cowboy through the shadowy alleyways of Redemption Creek, clinging to a promise made by a stranger that he would stand between her and whatever dangers the world might throw at her. Little did she know that this chance encounter behind a saloon would change both their lives forever. The livery stable was quiet as Victor led Olivia through the back entrance. Most of the town was gathered at the saloon or tucked in for the night, which worked to their advantage. Victor moved with the silent confidence of a man accustomed to staying unnoticed when necessary. "Wait here," he whispered, guiding Olivia to a shadowed corner filled with straw. She nodded, sinking down to rest her weary legs as she watched him approach an older man who appeared to be the stable hand. "Evening, Josiah," Victor greeted the man quietly. "Need my horse and another gentle mount if you've got one." The old man squinted at Victor, then noticed Olivia in the shadows. His bushy eyebrows rose, but he asked no questions, merely nodded. "Got a mare might suit. Belonged to the schoolteacher before she left town. Gentle as they come." Josiah hesitated. "Jenkins' men were asking after a woman earlier. Offering good money for information." Victor's jaw tightened. "And what did you tell them?" "Nothing. Never cared much for Jenkins or his type." Josiah spat on the ground. "Them railroad men think they own everything and everyone." "Appreciate your discretion," Victor said, pressing a few coins into the man's palm. Josiah waved away the money. "Keep it. Just get the lady somewhere safe. I'll tell anyone who asks that you rode north." Victor clapped the man's shoulder in thanks, then went to prepare the horses. Within minutes, he had a sturdy buckskin gelding and a dapple gray mare saddled and ready. He helped Olivia mount, his hands strong and steady as they gripped her waist. The simple kindness of his touch nearly undid her, making her realize how long it had been since anyone had treated her with such care. "You all right?" he asked, noticing her quick intake of breath. "Yes," she said, settling into the saddle and adjusting her position to accommodate her pregnancy. Thank you." Victor nodded, mounting his own horse. "We'll take it slow. The trail's not hard, but we'll stay off the main paths." They rode out through the back of the livery, keeping to the shadows of buildings until they reached the edge of town. Victor led them across a shallow creek bed and into the cover of a stand of cottonwood trees before they picked up speed. The night air was cool and clear. Stars spread across the vast Wyoming sky like diamonds scattered on velvet. Olivia found herself breathing easier with each mile they put between themselves and Redemption Creek. The gentle rhythm of the mare beneath her was soothing, and for the first time in months, she felt a measure of peace. "How far along are you?" Victor asked after they'd been riding for nearly an hour. 6 months, Olivia answered, her hand instinctively moving to her belly. "The baby's due in late November." Victor nodded, his gaze flickering to her middle before returning to the trail ahead. "And the father?" "This Jenkins fellow is what you told me true?" Olivia's cheeks burned with shame in the darkness. "Yes, Harold and I. We met when I was working as a seamstress for his household in Denver. He was kind to me, promised me the world. Said his marriage was in name only, that he would divorce his wife and marry me once certain business dealings were complete." She gave a bitter laugh. "I was naive enough to believe him." "That doesn't make you naive," Victor said quietly. "Just makes him a liar." They rode in silence for a while longer before Victor pointed to a cluster of trees ahead. "Camp's just through there. Nothing fancy, but it's hidden well enough." As they approached, Olivia could make out the dim glow of banked campfire embers. Victor's camp was indeed simple, a small tent, a bedroll and a few supplies arranged neatly around the fire pit, but it looked well established, as though he'd been staying there for some time. "You don't live in town?" Olivia asked as he helped her dismount. Victor shook his head. "Been working on a ranch about 10 miles west. Came into Redemption Creek for supplies." A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "Wasn't planning on bringing company back." "I'm sorry to impose," Olivia began, but Victor cut her off with a gentle shake of his head. "Don't apologize. I made my choice back there in that alley." He gestured toward the tent. "You take the tent, I'll sleep by the fire." "I couldn't." "You can and you will," he said firmly. "In your condition, you need proper rest." Olivia was too exhausted to argue further. Victor rekindled the fire, then brought her a tin cup of coffee and some jerky and hardtack from his provisions. "It's not much," he apologized. "I'll hunt something fresh tomorrow." "It's perfect," she said sincerely, realizing how hungry she was. As she ate, she studied her rescuer in the firelight. In his early 30s, Victor had the weathered look of a man who'd spent his life outdoors. His brown hair was a touch too long, curling slightly at the nape of his neck, and his green eyes reflected the dancing flames. There were lines at the corners of those eyes, laugh lines, she thought, though he hadn't smiled much since they'd met. "Where are you from, Mr. Northwood?" she asked. "Virginia originally, left after the war." A shadow crossed his face. "Been moving west ever since." "And family?" "Lost my folks during the war, no siblings." He poked at the fire. "What about you, miss?" "Randall, Olivia Randall, and no family left. My father died in a mining accident when I was 16. Mother passed from fever 2 years later." She stared into the fire. "I've been on my own since then, working where I could." Victor nodded slowly. "Well, Miss Randall, you should get some rest. Tomorrow we'll need to figure out our next steps." "Our next steps?" Olivia echoed, surprised. "Unless you'd rather I take you somewhere else." Victor looked up, his expression serious. "I meant what I said about protecting you, but I won't hold you if you have somewhere safer to go." Olivia felt her throat tighten. "I have nowhere," she admitted. "No family, no friends close enough to help. I've been running for weeks, ever since Jenkins turned on me." Victor was quiet for a long moment. "Then you'll stay with me until we sort something out. Jenkins won't give up easily, especially if he thinks you might cause him embarrassment with his wife." "But your job at the ranch, I can find work anywhere," he said simply. "Been doing it for years." Olivia studied him, bewildered by his willingness to upend his life for her. "Why are you doing this?" Truly, Victor stared into the fire for so long she thought he might not answer. Finally, he spoke, his voice low. "During the war, I saw men at their worst, doing terrible things because they could, because no one would stop them." His jaw tightened. I promised myself if I survived, I'd never stand by and watch someone suffer if I could help. Not ever again. The conviction in his voice silenced any further questions. Olivia merely nodded, understanding that there were depths to this man that went far beyond his quiet exterior. "Thank you," she said simply. Victor nodded, then got to his feet. "Get some sleep. I'll keep watch for a while." As Olivia settled into the small tent, wrapping herself in the blanket Victor had provided, she felt the baby stir within her. For the first time since discovering her pregnancy, she allowed herself to imagine a future where her child might be safe, might even be loved. It was a dangerous hope, she knew, but in the quiet of the night, with a stranger standing guard over her, Olivia let herself believe it might be possible. Dawn broke with a painter's palette of pinks and golds spreading across the eastern sky. Olivia woke to the smell of coffee and the sound of quiet movement outside the tent. She emerged, blinking in the early light, to find Victor crouched by the fire, turning strips of meat on a makeshift spit. "Morning," he greeted her. "Hope you like rabbit, caught a couple at first light." "It smells wonderful," Olivia said truthfully, her stomach rumbling at the savory aroma. Victor handed her a cup of coffee. "How did you sleep?" "Better than I have in weeks," she admitted, accepting the cup with gratitude. She sat on a fallen log near the fire, cradling the warm tin between her hands. "Have you been up all night?" "Got some rest," he said, though the shadows under his eyes suggested otherwise. "Thought I heard riders once, but they passed well to the north of us." Olivia tensed. "Jenkins' men?" "Possibly. Or just travelers," he shrugged. "Either way, they didn't come near." They ate breakfast in companionable silence, the rabbit tender and flavorful after days of subsisting on whatever scraps Olivia could afford. As Victor cleaned up afterward, she watched him move efficiently around the camp, his actions practiced and precise. "We need to discuss what happens next," he said finally, settling across from her. "Jenkins will have men searching every town within riding distance. What do you suggest?" Olivia asked, trying to keep the fear from her voice. Victor considered for a moment. "I've been thinking on that. We have two options as I see it. We can try to move far enough away that Jenkins has no reach California maybe, or up into Montana territory. Or, she prompted when he hesitated. Or we face him directly. Find a way to make him leave you alone for good." Olivia shook her head, her hand protectively covering her belly. "He's too powerful. He owns judges, sheriffs, even a state senator or two. We can't beat him that way." "Everyone has weaknesses," Victor said thoughtfully. "Men like Jenkins care about their reputation more than anything. If we could leverage something that would make it more costly for him to pursue you than to leave you be." "The only thing I know that could damage him is this child," Olivia said softly. "And I won't use my baby as a weapon, even against him." Victor nodded, respect evident in his eyes. "I understand. Then we move on, get you somewhere safe until the baby comes." "And then what?" Olivia asked, the question that had haunted her for months finally spoken aloud. "A woman alone with a child, no husband, no means of support. What kind of life can I provide?" Victor was quiet for a long moment, his green eyes studying her intently. "My grandfather had a small homestead up in Wyoming territory, near the Bighorn Mountains. Left it to me when he passed. It's been sitting empty for years, but the land's good. Might need some work to get it habitable again, but it's remote enough that Jenkins would never think to look there." Olivia stared at him, scarcely believing what he seemed to be offering. "You would take us there if you're willing." His expression was earnest. "It's a hard life, homesteading, especially with winter coming. But the nearest town's small enough that nobody asks too many questions, and I reckon we could make it comfortable before the snow sets in." "We," Olivia echoed, her heart suddenly racing. "You'd stay, Something flickered in Victor's eyes, uncertainty, perhaps, or something deeper. "I said I'd protect you. Can't do that if I'm not there. But your life, your work, my life's been wandering since the war ended," he said simply. "Might be nice to stay in one place for a while." Olivia tried to process his offer, overwhelmed by the generosity of this man she barely knew. "I don't know what to say." "Say you'll consider it," Victor replied, his voice gentle. "We don't have to decide right this minute. We'll need supplies and better transportation than 2 horses if we're heading that far north anyway. There's a small trading post about a day's ride from here where we can stock up without drawing attention." Olivia nodded, grateful for the reprieve from making such a momentous decision immediately. "When should we leave?" "Soon as we can break camp," Victor said, rising to his feet. "Best to keep moving." They packed quickly, leaving little trace of their overnight stay. Victor was methodical, teaching Olivia his system for securing things to the saddles as they worked. By mid-morning, they were riding north, keeping to less traveled paths through stands of pine and across small streams. As they rode side by side where the trail allowed, Olivia studied her companion's profile. There was a steadiness to Victor that she found profoundly reassuring, a quality she'd never encountered in Harold Jenkins with all his flashy wealth and grand promises. "Tell me about your grandfather's homestead," she said, after they'd been riding for a couple of hours. A smile touched Victor's lips, softening the hard planes of his face. "It's in a valley with a view of the mountains that'll take your breath away. Good water from a creek that runs year-round. The cabin needs work. It was old when Grandpa was still alive, but the bones are solid. There's a small barn, room enough for a cow, maybe some chickens." He glanced at her. "It's nothing fancy, nothing like what Jenkins probably promised you." "Jenkins promised many things," Olivia said quietly. "None of them real in the end." She looked ahead, imagining the place Victor described. "It sounds peaceful." "It is that," Victor agreed. "Isolated too, which has its challenges. Winter can be harsh that far north, and the nearest neighbor is 5 miles away." "I'm not afraid of hard work or solitude," Olivia said. "After everything that's happened, peace sounds like the greatest luxury imaginable." Victor nodded, seeming to approve of her answer. "We'd need to build up supplies before winter: canned goods, flour, sugar, coffee. Get a milk cow if we can, set snares for rabbits and such." "I know how to garden," Olivia offered, "and preserve food. My mother taught me. Good skills to have out there." Victor adjusted his hat against the sun. "And you can sew, you said?" "Yes, I worked as a seamstress for several years. I'm quite good, actually." "Another useful skill. Might even bring in some extra money if we can get to town now and then." Olivia felt a small flicker of pride at his approving tone. For months, Harold Jenkins had made her feel that her practical abilities were insignificant, that her only value lay in her beauty and her willingness to please him. Victor's matter-of-fact appreciation of her skills was refreshing in its sincerity. They stopped at midday to rest the horses and eat a simple lunch of jerky and the last of the morning's rabbit. As they sat in the shade of a large cottonwood, Olivia felt the baby move, a strong kick that made her gasp softly. Victor looked up, concerned. "You all right?" "Yes," she reassured him with a smile. "The baby's quite active today." Victor's gaze dropped to her belly, a strange expression crossing his face. "May I?" he asked hesitantly, extending his hand. Surprised but touched by the request, Olivia nodded, taking his rough hand and placing it where the baby was kicking. For a moment, nothing happened, and then a solid thump pressed against his palm. Victor's eyes widened, a look of wonder transforming his features. "Strong little one," he murmured. "Yes," Olivia agreed, watching him. "He or she takes after their mother, I suppose. I've had to be strong." Victor's hand lingered a moment longer before he withdrew it, an unreadable emotion in his eyes. "That you have," he said quietly. The intimate moment settled between them as they continued their journey, a small shift in their relationship that neither acknowledged directly but both felt. By late afternoon, dark clouds had gathered on the horizon, and a cool wind picked up, carrying the scent of rain. "Storm's coming," Victor observed, scanning the sky. "We should find shelter before it hits." "Is there a town nearby?" Olivia asked, feeling the first raindrops on her face. Victor shook his head. "Not close enough, but there's an old line shack about 2 miles ahead that hunters use sometimes. Might not be much, but it'll keep us dry." They urged their horses to a faster pace as the rain began to fall more steadily. By the time they reached the line shack, a crude, one-room cabin with a sagging roof, both were soaked through. Victor dismounted quickly and helped Olivia down, then led the horses to a lean-to attached to the side of the cabin. "Get inside," he told her, handing her his saddlebags. "I'll see to the horses." Olivia pushed open the cabin door, wincing at the musty smell that greeted her. The interior was sparse: a small iron stove in one corner, a narrow cot against the wall, a rough-hewn table and single chair the only furnishings. But it was dry, and when she found matches in a tin on the stove and managed to light the single lantern hanging from a hook, it seemed almost welcoming. Victor entered a few minutes later, rain dripping from his hat and coat. "Horses are settled," he reported, removing his wet outer garments and hanging them near the door. "Found some firewood stacked under the lean-to. Should be dry enough to burn." Working together, they soon had a fire going in the stove, its warmth gradually chasing the dampness from the small space. Victor pulled provisions from his saddlebags while Olivia arranged their wet clothes to dry. "Not exactly how I planned for us to spend the night," Victor said, looking around the cramped cabin, "but it'll do until the storm passes." Olivia nodded, suddenly acutely aware of their close proximity in the confined space. The cot was barely large enough for one person, let alone two, and certainly not a pregnant woman and a tall cowboy. "I'll sleep on the floor," Victor said, noticing her gaze. "You take the cot." "Victor, I can't keep taking your bed. You're not taking it," he corrected her gently. "I'm offering it. There's a difference." Outside, thunder crashed and the rain intensified, drumming on the roof with increasing force. A gust of wind rattled the single window, making Olivia jump. "Just the wind," Victor reassured her, moving to check that the shutters were secure. As he did, a sudden flash of lightning illuminated the cabin, followed immediately by a deafening crack of thunder. The old building shuddered, and a section of the roof gave way, sending a cascade of water pouring in directly over the cot. "Damn!" Victor exclaimed, rushing to move their supplies away from the deluge. Olivia grabbed blankets and the few dry clothes they had, backing away from the spreading puddle. The leak showed no signs of stopping, water streaming steadily through the new hole in the roof. The cot was quickly soaked, rendering it unusable. "So much for sleeping arrangements," Victor muttered, pushing his wet hair back from his forehead. "Floor it is for both of us, I reckon." He managed to find a relatively dry corner of the cabin furthest from the leak. Using saddle blankets and their few dry clothes, he created a makeshift pallet just large enough for two if they lay close together. "It's not ideal," he said apologetically, "but it's the best we can do tonight." Olivia nodded, trying to hide her nervousness at the prospect of sleeping so near to him. It wasn't proper, of course, but then nothing about her situation was proper anymore. And this man had already shown himself to be honorable in ways Harold Jenkins could never understand. They shared a meager dinner of jerky and hardtack, sitting cross-legged on the floor near the stove. The storm continued to rage outside, wind howling around the eaves of the old cabin. "Will the roof hold?" Olivia asked, eyeing the ceiling nervously. "What's left of it should," Victor replied with a wry smile. "This old place has probably weathered worse storms." As the evening wore on, the temperature dropped considerably. Despite the stove, a distinct chill pervaded the cabin, made worse by the dampness of their surroundings. Olivia couldn't help shivering, her thin dress still not completely dry. "Here," Victor said, noticing her discomfort. He removed his vest, the driest garment either of them had, and draped it over her shoulders. "It's not much, but it might help." "Thank you," Olivia said, touched by the gesture. The vest carried his scent leather, tobacco, and something uniquely him, and she found it oddly comforting. When it came time to sleep, Victor banked the fire in the stove to last as long as possible, then settled onto the makeshift pallet, positioning himself at the very edge to give Olivia as much space as he could. "Try to get some rest," he said, his voice low in the darkness. Storm might have passed by morning. Olivia lay down beside him, keeping a careful distance between them. But as the night progressed and the temperature continued to drop, she found herself instinctively moving closer to his warmth. Half asleep, she wasn't fully aware when Victor hesitantly put an arm around her, drawing her against his chest. "Just to keep warm," he murmured against her hair. "Nothing improper." "I know," Olivia whispered back, grateful for his solid presence. For the first time since fleeing Denver, she felt truly safe. Outside, the storm gradually subsided, but inside the small cabin, something new was brewing, a tentative connection forming between two wounded souls who had found each other in the most unlikely of circumstances. Morning arrived with clear skies and birdsong, the storm having blown itself out during the night. Olivia woke slowly, aware of a steady heartbeat beneath her cheek and strong arms around her. For a moment, disoriented by sleep, she tensed, then remembered Victor, the storm, the leaking roof. She opened her eyes to find him already awake, watching her with an expression that made her breath catch. When he realized she was awake, he quickly looked away, gently disentangling himself. "Apologies," he said, his voice rough with sleep. "It got cold in the night." "No need to apologize," Olivia replied softly, feeling a blush warm her cheeks. "I was grateful for the warmth." They moved around each other carefully as they prepared to depart, a new awareness between them that neither acknowledged directly. The cabin looked even more dilapidated in the morning light, water still dripping from the damaged section of roof. "Trading post is about 6 hours' ride from here," Victor said as they saddled the horses. "Weather holds, we should make it by mid-afternoon." The day was perfect for traveling, sunny but not too hot, the rain having settled the dust on the trails. They rode mostly in companionable silence, each lost in their own thoughts. Olivia found herself stealing glances at Victor's profile, remembering the security of his arms around her during the night. It had been a long time since she'd felt protected rather than pursued. As promised, they reached the trading post by mid-afternoon, a cluster of log buildings at a crossroads between two seldom-used trails. A general store, a smithy, and a small saloon were the only businesses, with a few scattered cabins nearby. It was the kind of place travelers stopped for necessities before moving on, not a destination in itself. "Small enough that Jenkins' men aren't likely to come looking," Victor explained as they approached. "Owner's a man named Arlo Finch, keeps to himself, doesn't ask questions." They stabled their horses behind the general store, then entered the shop. It was dim inside, shelves stocked with everything from canned goods to tools to bolts of fabric. A grizzled man with one eye, Arlo, Olivia presumed, looked up from behind the counter as they entered. "Northwood," he greeted Victor with a nod. Been a spell. Finch, Victor returned. Need supplies for a long journey and information if you've got any. Finch's good eye flickered to Olivia, noting her condition, but he made no comment. What sort of information? Heard anything about men looking for a woman. Working for Harold Jenkins of the Mountain Pacific Railroad. The shopkeeper's face revealed nothing. Might have. 2 riders came through yesterday asking questions. Told them I hadn't seen anyone matching their description. He glanced at Olivia again. Wasn't lying at the time. Appreciate that, Victor said. Any idea which way they were headed? South toward Laramie, Finch replied. Said something about checking the stage stops. Victor nodded thoughtfully. We need provisions for at least 2 weeks' travel. And I'm looking to trade these horses for a wagon if anyone around here has one to sell. Tucker might, Finch said. Has an old Conestoga he's been looking to unload. Not pretty, but solid enough. His place is just up the road. He paused. Where you headed, if you don't mind my asking? North, Victor said simply. Got business in Wyoming territory. Finch seemed to accept this vague answer. Lady might want to look at some fabric while you're here. Got a new shipment last week. And there's a widow woman lives in the last cabin who might have some clothes to spare. He directed this to Olivia. Name's Martha. Tell her Arlo sent you. Olivia thanked him, grateful for the suggestion. Her one dress was showing considerable wear after weeks on the road. They spent the next hour gathering supplies: flour, coffee, sugar, salt, beans, and other staples that would sustain them on the journey north. Victor also purchased ammunition, a new hunting knife, and practical items like rope and extra blankets. While Victor went to negotiate for the wagon, Olivia visited Martha, the widow Finch had mentioned. She was a kind-faced woman in her 50s who took one look at Olivia's condition and ushered her inside without hesitation. Land's sakes, child, you look about ready to drop that baby, she exclaimed. Come in, come in. Arlo said you might need some things. Martha proved to be a godsend, providing Olivia with 2 serviceable dresses that she quickly altered to accommodate her pregnancy, a warm shawl, and even some baby clothes she'd made for her daughter's child who had tragically died in infancy. No use letting them go to waste, Martha said firmly when Olivia tried to protest. That little one will need them more than my memory chest does. When Victor returned to collect her, he had news of his own. Got the wagon, he reported, and some information. Jenkins has men watching the main trails north and the railroad stations. But there's an old trapper's route through the mountains that'll take us to Wyoming territory without crossing any major roads. Is it safe? Olivia asked, thinking of her condition. It's rough in places, Victor admitted. But safer than risking a run-in with Jenkins' men. They spent the night in a small room behind the general store that Finch rented to travelers. 2 narrow cots separated by a curtain providing at least the illusion of privacy. In the morning, they loaded their supplies into the wagon, a sturdy if weathered Conestoga with a canvas cover that would protect them from the elements. I'll drive, Victor told Olivia as he helped her climb onto the seat. You rest when you can. It'll be slow going for a while. As they pulled away from the trading post, Olivia felt a strange mixture of apprehension and hope. They were heading into the unknown, toward a place she'd never seen, with a man she'd known for only days. Yet somehow, it felt right, like the first step on a path that had been waiting for her all along. The trapper's route proved every bit as challenging as Victor had warned. It wound through dense forests and over rocky terrain, sometimes barely wide enough for the wagon to pass. Progress was slow, with Victor often having to clear fallen branches or guide the horses carefully around obstacles. On the 3rd day, as they navigated a particularly steep section, Olivia noticed Victor wincing as he handled the reins. Are you hurt? she asked, concerned. He shook his head dismissively. Old wound acts up sometimes, nothing to worry about. But as the day wore on, his discomfort became more apparent. When they made camp that evening in a small clearing, Olivia insisted on examining his shoulder after she caught him trying to massage it when he thought she wasn't looking. "Let me help," she said firmly. "I'm not completely helpless, you know." Victor hesitated, then nodded, removing his shirt with some difficulty. Olivia gasped softly at what she saw: a mass of scar tissue across his left shoulder and upper back, clearly from a severe injury. "Shrapnel," he explained quietly. "Battle of the Wilderness, 64. Doctor said I was lucky it didn't take my arm." Olivia gently traced the edge of the scar with her fingertips. "Does it pain you often?" "Only when I overdo it," Victor admitted, "or when the weather's changing." Olivia rummaged in her bag for the small jar of liniment Martha had given her for her own aches. "This might help," she said, warming the ointment between her palms before carefully applying it to his scarred shoulder. Victor tensed at her touch, then gradually relaxed as her fingers worked the tight muscles. "That helps," he murmured, his voice lower than usual. "Thank you." The intimacy of the moment hung between them, her hands on his bare skin, his vulnerability exposed. When she finished, Victor cleared his throat and quickly put his shirt back on, but something had shifted between them once again. They ate dinner in reflective silence, the campfire casting long shadows as night fell. Above them, stars appeared one by one, impossibly bright against the velvet darkness. "Were you married?" Olivia asked suddenly, the question slipping out before she could reconsider it. "Before the war, I mean." Victor looked surprised, then shook his head. "No. There was a girl, Sarah was her name. We talked about getting married when I came home." His expression darkened. "But I came back different." She tried to understand, but he shrugged. "Some things can't be explained to those who weren't there." "I'm sorry," Olivia said softly. "Don't be." "It was a long time ago." He poked at the fire. "What about you? Before Jenkins, was there someone?" Olivia smiled sadly. "There was a young man in my hometown, Thomas. We grew up together. Everyone assumed we'd marry eventually. But after my father died in the mine collapse, the company evicted us from our home. Mother and I moved to Denver to find work, and Thomas, well, he didn't wait for me." "His loss," Victor said simply. Olivia felt warmth bloom in her chest at his words. "I thought Harold was my second chance at happiness," she confessed. "He was charming, sophisticated, wealthy, everything Thomas wasn't. I was flattered by his attention." "Men like Jenkins know exactly how to get what they want," Victor said, his jaw tightening. "They make promises they never intend to keep, use people like tools." "Yes," Olivia agreed quietly. "I see that now. I just wish I'd seen it sooner before." She placed her hand on her belly. "That child is innocent of its father's sins," Victor said firmly, "and so are you. Jenkins is the only one who should feel shame." His conviction brought tears to Olivia's eyes. For months, she had carried not only the physical burden of her pregnancy, but the weight of her own perceived failure and foolishness. Victor's words lifted some of that burden, allowing her to breathe more freely. "Thank you," she whispered, "for saying that, for everything." Victor merely nodded, but his eyes held hers across the fire, communicating what words could not. The next morning they continued their journey, the wagon creaking and swaying as it navigated the rough trail. By Olivia's calculations, they were still at least a week away from Victor's homestead, possibly more given their slow progress. As they traveled, they fell into a comfortable routine. Victor hunted fresh game when they could spare the time, teaching Olivia how to prepare and cook whatever he caught. In the evenings, she sewed by firelight, altering clothes or mending tears in the wagon's canvas. They shared stories of their lives before meeting Victor's childhood in Virginia, Olivia's in a Colorado mining town, gradually filling in the outlines of who they had been. On the seventh day, they emerged from the forest into a sweeping valley dotted with wildflowers, a crystal-clear river winding through its center. The sight was so beautiful it made Olivia catch her breath. "We'll follow the river north for the next few days," Victor explained. "More exposed, but easier traveling for the wagon." They made camp early that day, both eager to wash away the dust of travel in the river's cool waters. Victor went upstream to bathe while Olivia found a secluded spot downstream, grateful for the chance to properly clean herself for the first time in days. The water was bracingly cold but refreshing. Olivia washed her hair and body, then donned one of the clean dresses Martha had given her. As she brushed out her damp hair by the riverbank, she caught sight of her reflection in a still pool. Her face was sun-kissed from days on the trail, and there was a clarity in her eyes that hadn't been there before. The woman looking back at her was stronger than the one who had fled Denver in fear changed by hardship. Yes, but not broken by it. When she returned to camp, she found Victor had built up the fire and was preparing a stew with a rabbit he'd snared earlier. His hair was damp too, curling slightly at the ends, and he'd shaved, revealing a strong jawline usually hidden behind stubble. "Feel better?" he asked, looking up from his task. "Immensely," Olivia replied with a smile, settling on a log near the fire. "It's amazing what a difference a proper wash makes," Victor nodded in agreement. "Used to be the first thing I'd do after a long cattle drive, find the nearest bathhouse and soak until the trail dust was gone." "You were a drover?" Olivia asked, curious about this new detail of his past. "Among other things," Victor confirmed. "Worked cattle drives from Texas to Kansas for a few years after the war, did some scouting for the Army, some hunting and trapping, whatever paid enough to keep moving. And now," Olivia studied him, "what were you doing before you found me?" Victor stirred the stew, considering his answer. "Working as a ranch hand for the Triple R spread west of Redemption Creek. Good enough work, but not permanent, never is." "Why not?" Olivia asked softly. "Why keep moving all these years?" Victor was quiet for a long moment. "After the war, staying in one place felt like being trapped. Too many memories, too many ghosts." He looked up, meeting her gaze directly. "But lately I've been thinking it might be time to stop running." The implication hung in the air between them, unspoken but unmistakable. Olivia felt her heart quicken, but before she could respond, a sharp pain seized her abdomen, making her gasp. "Olivia!" Victor was immediately at her side, concern etched on his face. "It's all right," she assured him as the pain subsided. "Just the baby moving." "It happens sometimes, takes my breath away for a moment." Victor didn't look convinced. "You're sure?" "Yes," she said, though something about this pain had felt different from the baby's usual movements. "I'm fine, truly." Reluctantly, Victor returned to the fire, but he kept glancing at her throughout the evening, his worry evident. When they settled in to sleep Olivia in the wagon, Victor on his bedroll nearby, she heard him stir multiple times, checking on her from a distance. His concern touched her deeply. Harold Jenkins had shown no interest in her pregnancy beyond the inconvenience it posed to his plans. Victor's attentiveness was something entirely new, something that made her wonder if the fragile hope she'd been nurturing might be justified after all. The next morning dawned clear and bright, but as they prepared to depart, Olivia felt unusually tired, a dull ache persisting in her lower back. She said nothing, not wanting to delay their journey or worry Victor unnecessarily. They followed the river northward, the wagon rolling more smoothly on the valley floor than it had in the forest. By midday, however, Olivia was struggling to hide her discomfort. The intermittent pains had returned, stronger now, and she found herself gripping the edge of the seat during the worst of them. Victor noticed, of course. "We're stopping," he announced after watching her try to suppress a grimace. "Something's not right." "We should keep going," Olivia protested weakly. "We need to cover more ground before dark." "The ground can wait," Victor said firmly, already guiding the wagon toward a shady grove near the river. "You can't." Once they stopped, Victor helped her down from the wagon and made her comfortable on a blanket spread beneath a large cottonwood. He brought her water, hovering anxiously as she drank. "How long have you been in pain?" he asked. Olivia sighed, knowing she couldn't hide it any longer. "Since last night, but it's probably just false labor. The baby's not due for weeks yet." Victor frowned. "Is there anything I can do to help?" "Just rest, I think," Olivia said, trying to sound more confident than she felt. "And perhaps some of that willow bark tea Martha gave us for headaches. She said it helps with various pains." Victor immediately set about preparing the tea, his movements quick and precise. As he worked, Olivia closed her eyes, trying to relax as another wave of discomfort washed over her. When the pain intensified an hour later, coming at regular intervals that left her breathless, she could no longer deny what was happening. "Victor," she called, her voice tight with fear. "I think the baby's coming." The color drained from his face, but to his credit, he remained outwardly calm. "Are you sure? It's too early, isn't it?" Olivia nodded, grimacing as another contraction gripped her. "A few weeks early, yes, but babies come when they're ready, not when we expect them." Victor ran a hand through his hair, clearly at a loss. "What do I do?" "We're days from any town with a doctor or midwife." "Then you'll have to help me," Olivia said, reaching for his hand. "I've seen births before, helped my mother assist our neighbors when I was younger. I know what needs to happen, but I can't do it alone." Victor looked terrified at the prospect, but he squeezed her hand and nodded. "Tell me what to do." The next few hours were a blur of pain and focused effort. Victor followed Olivia's instructions with unwavering dedication, boiling water, preparing clean cloths from their supplies, helping her walk when the pain allowed, supporting her when it didn't. As evening approached, the contractions came faster and stronger, leaving Olivia gasping for breath between them. "You're doing wonderfully," Victor murmured, wiping her forehead with a cool cloth. "You're the strongest person I've ever met, Olivia Randall." She managed a weak smile through her pain. "Remind me of that when this is over." As night fell, Olivia's labor intensified. Victor built up the fire for light and warmth, then returned to her side, offering steady support as she worked to bring her child into the world. "I'm scared," she admitted during a brief respite between contractions. "What if something goes wrong?" Victor took her hand, his green eyes reflecting the firelight. "Nothing will go wrong," he said with a conviction that belied his own fear. "I won't let it. I promise to stand between you and the world, remember. That includes standing between you and anything that might harm you or this baby." His words gave her strength, and when the next contraction came, Olivia bore down with renewed determination. Just after midnight, under a canopy of stars in the Wyoming wilderness, Olivia's daughter was born into Victor Northwood's waiting hands. "A girl," he announced, his voice thick with emotion as he gently wrapped the squalling infant in the soft blanket they'd prepared. "A perfect little girl." He placed the baby on Olivia's chest, and she gazed down at her daughter's red, angry face with a love so fierce it took her breath away. "Hello, little one," she whispered. "You're early, but oh so welcome." Victor busied himself with the practical matters that followed birth, things Olivia had instructed him about earlier. His hands were steady now, his earlier nervousness replaced by purposeful efficiency. When everything was settled, he sat beside them, his expression a mixture of awe and tenderness as he looked at the baby. "She's beautiful," he said softly, "like her mother." Olivia felt tears spring to her eyes at the simple sincerity in his voice. "Would you like to hold her?" Victor hesitated, then nodded, carefully taking the tiny bundle into his arms. The baby, who had been fussing, immediately quieted, as if sensing she was safe in his embrace. "Hello, little miss," he murmured, one large finger gently tracing her cheek. "You gave us quite a scare, arriving so suddenly." Watching him cradle her daughter with such natural tenderness, Olivia felt something settle in her heart, a certainty that had been growing since that first night behind the saloon. "What will you name her?" Victor asked, reluctantly handing the baby back when she began to root hungrily against his chest. Olivia helped the newborn latch on, marveling at the instinct that guided her tiny daughter. "I was thinking, Virginia," she said, watching his face carefully, "after your home state." "If that's all right with you." Victor's eyes widened, a flicker of emotion passing over his features. "You would name her after my home. You saved both our lives," Olivia said simply. "It seems fitting that she carry a reminder of that." Victor was silent for a long moment, clearly moved. "Virginia," he repeated softly. "It's a beautiful name." "Virginia Martha Randall," Olivia decided, adding the name of the kind widow who had helped them. Though, she hesitated, gathering her courage. "Though perhaps someday, if things work out as I hope they might, her name could be Virginia Martha Northwood." Victor's head snapped up, his eyes meeting hers with an intensity that made her heart race. "Olivia," he began, his voice rough with emotion. "I know it's too soon," she rushed on. "We've known each other barely 2 weeks. But in that time, you've shown me more kindness, more honor, more everything than I ever thought possible. And I find myself hoping that perhaps, in time, you might come to care for us both as more than just people you've promised to protect." Victor moved closer, his hand gently cupping her cheek. "Olivia Randall," he said, his voice steady now. "I think I started caring for you the moment I saw you crying behind that saloon, and every day since, I've cared a little more." His gaze dropped to the baby nursing contentedly in her arms. "As for this little one, she had my heart the instant I held her." "So you're not opposed to the idea, someday?" Olivia asked, hardly daring to hope. "Opposed?" Victor laughed softly. "Olivia, I've been trying to figure out how to ask if you'd consider staying at the homestead permanently, not just until the baby came, not just until we were sure Jenkins had given up the search, but forever. As my wife, if you'd have me." Joy bloomed in Olivia's chest, warming her from within. "I would have you," she whispered. "Gladly." Victor leaned forward, hesitating just a breath away from her lips. "May I?" In answer, Olivia closed the distance between them, her free hand reaching up to curl around the nape of his neck as their lips met in a tender first kiss. It was gentle, mindful of her exhausted state, but held the promise of deeper passion to come. When they parted, Victor rested his forehead against hers. "We should wait," he said pragmatically. "Do things properly when we reach the homestead, when you've had time to recover and we can find a preacher." "Yes," Olivia agreed, though she was certain her feelings wouldn't change. "But I like knowing what's ahead." Victor smiled, the most unguarded expression she'd seen on his face. "A family," he said simply. "That's what's ahead, the 3 of us together." As if understanding the significance of the moment, little Virginia let out a contented sigh in her sleep. Outside their circle of firelight, the wild Wyoming night continued, stars wheeling overhead, the river flowing steadily northward, the vast landscape stretching in all directions. But within their small camp, a family had been born, not by blood or law just yet, but by choice and by love. And for Olivia, who had once stood alone and terrified behind a saloon. There could be no greater miracle than that. The next few days passed in a haze of exhaustion and wonder for Olivia. Despite her insistence that they continue their journey, Victor refused to move camp until she had regained some strength. He cared for both mother and baby with surprising competence, bringing Olivia food and water, helping her wash, and even changing Virginia's improvised diapers without complaint. "Where did you learn to care for babies?" Olivia asked on the third day, watching as Victor expertly swaddled Virginia after bathing her in a basin of warmed river water. "Had 4 younger siblings," he replied, securing the blanket with a gentle tuck. "Ma relied on me to help, especially after Pa went to work in the shipyards in Norfolk." The casual revelation of this piece of his past one he hadn't mentioned before touched Olivia deeply. Since Virginia's birth, Victor had begun sharing more of himself, as if the baby's arrival had unlocked something in him. "What happened to them?" she asked softly. "Your siblings?" A shadow crossed Victor's face. "2 brothers died in the war, one at Antietam, one at Gettysburg. Sister Ruth died of typhoid the winter before the war ended." He carefully handed Virginia back to Olivia. "Youngest sister, Mary, married a shopkeeper in Richmond. Last letter I got said they were doing well enough." "You don't keep in touch?" Victor shook his head. "Not for years now." "After the war, it was easier to make a clean break. Start fresh out west where nobody knew me or what I'd done." Olivia cradled Virginia against her chest, studying the man who had so unexpectedly become her protector, her friend, and now perhaps her future. "What did you do that was so terrible you had to leave everything behind?" Victor was quiet for a long moment, staring into the campfire. "Survived," he said finally, "when so many better men didn't." The simple answer held volumes of pain. Olivia reached out, taking his hand in hers. "I'm glad you survived," she said softly. "Virginia and I both are." His fingers tightened around hers, and though he didn't look up, she felt the tension in his shoulders ease slightly. On the 5th day after Virginia's birth, they resumed their journey. Victor had modified the wagon, creating a comfortable nest of blankets where Olivia could rest with the baby while he drove. Progress was slower now, as he chose the smoothest paths to avoid jostling his precious cargo. "How much further?" Olivia asked as they stopped to make camp on the second evening of travel. 3 days, maybe 4, Victor estimated, helping her down from the wagon with Virginia securely cradled in one arm. "Depends on the weather and the trails. We're entering the foothills of the Bighorns now." The landscape had indeed changed, the flat valley giving way to rolling hills and scattered pine forests. The air was crisper at the higher elevation, carrying the scent of pine resin and distant snow. As promised, 4 days later they crested a ridge and Victor pulled the wagon to a halt. "There it is," he said, pointing to the valley below. "Northwood homestead." Olivia followed his gesture, taking in the scene spread before them. The valley was smaller than she'd imagined but breathtakingly beautiful, nestled between tree-covered hills with a view of the mountains beyond. A clear creek wound through its center, and near it stood a small log cabin with a stone chimney. A weathered barn and corral completed the little settlement. Wildflowers dotted the meadow surrounding the buildings, splashes of yellow and purple against the green. "Oh, Victor," Olivia breathed. "It's perfect." He gave her a sideways glance, looking almost shy. "It needs work. The cabin roof probably leaks and the barn could use new boards in places." "It's perfect," Olivia repeated firmly, Virginia sleeping peacefully in her arms. "It's home." The smile that broke across Victor's face was like sunrise after a long night, radiant and full of hope. He urged the horses forward, down the winding trail that led to the valley floor. As they approached the cabin, Olivia could see that Victor's assessment had been accurate. Years of neglect had taken their toll on the buildings. But the foundations were solid, and she could immediately envision what it could become with care and attention. Grandfather built it with his own hands, Victor explained as he helped Olivia and Virginia down from the wagon. Added to it over the years as he could afford lumber. The main cabin was a single large room with a stone fireplace at one end. A ladder led to a small loft above. The windows were intact, though dusty, and the roof appeared reasonably sound despite Victor's concerns. Simple, handcrafted furniture remained: a table and chairs, a bed frame with a straw tick mattress, a rocking chair by the fireplace, and various shelves and cupboards built into the walls. "It's larger than I expected," Olivia commented as Victor opened windows to air out the musty space. "Grandfather had plans for a family," Victor said, running his hand along the mantelpiece. "Never happened for him. Grandmother died young, and he never remarried. But he built the place thinking of children, grandchildren." Olivia watched as he moved around the cabin, noting the mix of emotions playing across his face. This place held memories for him, good ones, she thought, from the gentle way he touched things, the small smile that appeared as he examined carvings on one of the bedposts. "You spent time here as a child?" she asked. Victor nodded. "Summer visits, mostly. Best times of my life, those summers. Grandfather taught me to hunt, fish, track game, how to read the weather, find my way by stars." He glanced at Olivia. "I'd like to teach Virginia those things someday." "I'd like that too," she said softly. They spent the rest of the day cleaning the cabin and unloading essential supplies. Victor insisted that Olivia rest frequently, taking Virginia whenever she needed a break. By evening, the main room was habitable, the bed made up with fresh linens from their supplies, the fireplace cleared and a cheerful fire burning, the table and chairs scrubbed clean. That night, as they sat by the fire after a simple meal, Virginia sleeping in a makeshift cradle Victor had fashioned from a wooden box padded with blankets, Olivia felt a contentment she hadn't known was possible. This small cabin, rough and remote as it was, already felt more like home than any place she'd lived since childhood. Victor seemed to be thinking along similar lines. "Tomorrow I'll ride to the nearest town, Piney Ridge, about 15 miles east. Need to get more supplies, and there's a preacher there." Olivia looked up sharply. "A preacher?" Victor met her gaze steadily. "If you still want to make things official, if you've changed your mind." "I haven't," Olivia said quickly. "Not at all, I just—" "Are you sure, Victor? Once we do this, there's no going back. Virginia and we're a package deal." "That's what I'm counting on," he said, moving from his chair to kneel beside her. "Olivia, I know it's been less than a month since I found you behind that saloon. But I've lived enough to know when something is right." He took her hand in his. "You and Virginia, you're right. The three of us together making a life here, it feels like what I've been looking for since the war ended, like coming home after being lost for years." Tears filled Olivia's eyes at the raw honesty in his words. "I feel the same," she whispered. "I never thought I'd find this safety, belonging, a man I could truly trust after what happened with Harold." Victor's jaw tightened at the mention of Jenkins. "Has he tried to find you? Send messages, anything?" Olivia shook her head. "Not that I know of. Once he made it clear he wanted nothing to do with the baby, I became an inconvenience to be removed." She glanced at Virginia, sleeping peacefully. "She deserves better than that for a father." "She'll have better," Victor promised, his voice fervent. "I may not be much, just a scarred-up former soldier with a run-down homestead, but I swear to you both, I'll be the best father I know how to be." Olivia cupped his face in her hands, overwhelmed by the sincerity of his pledge. You're already more than I ever dared hope for, Victor Northwood. He turned his head to press a kiss to her palm, then rose to his feet. Get some rest. I'll leave at first light for Piney Ridge. With luck, I'll be back by tomorrow evening and we can be married the day after. True to his word, Victor returned the following evening with a wagon loaded with supplies, lumber for repairs, additional food staples, tools, seed for planting, and even fabric for curtains and new clothes. He'd also brought a rocking chair specifically designed for nursing mothers, which brought tears to Olivia's eyes. The preacher's coming day after tomorrow, he reported as they unloaded the wagon. Name's Reverend Thomas Baker, said he's happy to perform the ceremony here. So soon. Olivia asked, surprised. Victor gave her a questioning look. Is that all right? I thought it's perfect, she assured him quickly. Just unexpected. Most preachers I've known would want to meet both parties first, ask questions. Victor smiled slightly. Reverend Baker isn't most preachers. He was a chaplain during the war, seen enough of life to know that sometimes conventions need to be set aside. He paused in his work. I told him our situation, the truth of it, about Virginia, about Jenkins, about how we met. He still agreed to marry us. Olivia was stunned. And he doesn't disapprove, said something about God working in mysterious ways, and that he'd rather bless a union built on genuine care than many of the loveless marriages he's witnessed. Victor shrugged. He's coming for dinner tomorrow to meet you. Then we'll have the ceremony the following morning if you're both satisfied. The next day, Olivia found herself unexpectedly nervous about meeting Reverend Baker. She'd spent the morning cleaning the cabin again, then bathed both herself and Virginia in water heated on the stove. She donned her best dress, the one Martha had given her, freshly washed and pressed, and arranged her hair with particular care. You look beautiful, Victor said when he came in from chopping wood, his eyes warming as they took in her appearance. Both of you do. Virginia, dressed in one of the tiny gowns Martha had provided, waved her fists as if in agreement from her cradle. Reverend Baker arrived promptly at 4 o'clock, a tall, lean man with silver-streaked black hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed spectacles. He greeted Olivia warmly, admired Virginia with genuine appreciation, and accepted a cup of coffee from Victor without ceremony. Victor has told me your story, he said to Olivia after they'd settled at the table. A remarkable journey you've had. Olivia felt herself tense, waiting for judgment, but the Reverend's expression remained open and compassionate. I would like to hear, in your own words, why you wish to marry Victor, he continued gently. Olivia glanced at Victor, who gave her an encouraging nod. When I fled Denver, I had lost faith in everything, in men, in God, in my own judgment, she began slowly. I was certain my child and I would face nothing but hardship and rejection. Then Victor found me behind that saloon, and without hesitation, he offered protection when he had nothing to gain by doing so. She took a deep breath, organizing her thoughts. In the weeks since, I've come to know him as a man of honor, of kindness, of unwavering principle. He has treated my daughter as if she were his own from the moment she was born. Her voice strengthened with conviction. I wish to marry Victor because I have found in him what I thought didn't exist, a man whose actions match his words, whose promises can be trusted. Because he has shown me that true strength lies in gentleness, and true courage in standing for what's right even when it's difficult. She met the Reverend's gaze directly. And yes, because I have come to love him, quickly though it may have happened. Reverend Baker's expression was thoughtful as he turned to Victor. And you, son, why do you wish to marry Olivia? Victor cleared his throat, clearly less comfortable with expressing his feelings than Olivia had been. When I found Olivia that day, something just clicked into place, he said haltingly. like finding a piece of myself I didn't know was missing. These past weeks, watching her courage, her strength, her kindness, it's made me want to be a better man. He looked at Olivia, his green eyes intense with emotion. I want to marry her because she makes me feel like I've finally found my way home after years of wandering. Because Virginia deserves a father who will love her as his own, and because he swallowed hard. Because I love them both more than I thought it was possible to love anyone after everything I've seen and done. The Reverend studied them both for a long moment, then smiled. I believe God brought you two together for a reason. Your circumstances may be unconventional, but the foundation you're building on respect, honesty, shared values, and genuine affection is stronger than many marriages that begin with all the social advantages. He reached into his coat and produced a small Bible. If you're both certain, I would be honored to perform the ceremony tomorrow morning. The wedding took place just after sunrise the next day. Victor and Olivia stood before Reverend Baker on the porch of the cabin, with Virginia cradled in Olivia's arms. The morning light bathed everything in a golden glow, and wildflowers Victor had gathered before dawn filled jam jars placed around the porch. Olivia wore the same dress from the previous day, but Victor had surprised her with a crown of daisies and bluebells for her hair. He himself had shaved carefully and donned the one good shirt he owned, looking more nervous than she had ever seen him. The ceremony was simple and brief, but no less meaningful for its simplicity. When Reverend Baker pronounced them husband and wife, Victor's kiss was gentle but filled with promise, his hands cradling her face as if she were made of precious glass. "Mrs. Northwood," he murmured against her lips. "Mr. Northwood," she returned with a smile that felt as bright as the rising sun. After the Reverend departed, they spent the day in quiet celebration, a special meal, a walk around their property where Victor pointed out his plans for improvements, and hours simply being together as a family. That night, after Virginia was asleep in her cradle, they consummated their marriage with tender passion, discovering each other's bodies with the same care and respect that had marked their relationship from the beginning. Afterward, lying in each other's arms, Olivia felt a sense of rightness, of completion that she had never experienced before. "I never imagined I could be this happy," she confessed, her head resting on Victor's chest, his heartbeat steady beneath her ear. He stroked her hair, his other arm holding her close. "Nor I," he admitted. "For years after the war, I thought happiness wasn't meant for men like me. And now," he tilted her chin up to look into her eyes, "now I think perhaps I suffered then so I could recognize the blessing when it came. So I would know what I had found and never take it for granted." Olivia stretched up to kiss him, pouring all her love and gratitude into the gesture. When they parted, Victor pressed his forehead to hers. "I promise you, Olivia Northwood," he whispered, "I will spend every day making sure you never regret choosing me." "I could never regret it," she assured him, "not when you've given me everything I ever wanted and more." The months that followed were filled with hard work and simple joys as they transformed the neglected homestead into a thriving home. Victor repaired the cabin roof, added a lean-to kitchen at Olivia's request, and rebuilt much of the barn. They planted a garden, acquired 2 milk cows and a dozen chickens, and even managed to put up preserves for the coming winter. Virginia thrived under their care, growing from a tiny newborn into a chubby, cheerful baby with Victor's green eyes and Olivia's auburn hair. She was the center of their world, and Victor doted on her shamelessly, carrying her with him as he worked around the homestead whenever possible. Word spread in the nearest communities about the Northwoods, the war veteran and his young wife with their baby girl, building a life in the remote valley. Occasional visitors stopped by a traveling peddler, neighboring ranchers curious about the new arrivals, even Reverend Baker making a social call on his circuit. One crisp autumn day, as the aspen trees turned gold against the evergreen slopes, Victor returned from Piney Ridge with the mail and an odd expression on his face. "What is it?" Olivia asked, looking up from where she was hanging laundry on the line while Virginia played on a blanket nearby. Victor handed her a newspaper. "News from Denver," he said quietly. Olivia took it with trepidation, scanning the headlines until she found what had caught Victor's attention. "Railroad Baron Jenkins dead in suspicious circumstances." The article detailed how Harold Jenkins had been found dead in his Denver mansion, apparently the victim of a robbery gone wrong. His widow was quoted expressing shock and grief, though the paper noted that Mrs. Jenkins would inherit his considerable fortune. "I don't know what to feel," Olivia admitted, setting the paper aside. "Relief that we no longer need to worry about him finding us, certainly, but not happiness at his death." Victor nodded, his expression somber. "You have a good heart, Olivia. That's one of the many reasons I love you." She leaned into him as he put his arm around her shoulders. "What do you think happened? Do you think it was really a robbery?" Victor was silent for a moment. The article mentioned Jenkins had recently made powerful enemies among his business associates. "I suspect someone decided he was more valuable dead than alive. The world he lived in that I almost became part of is so different from this," Olivia said, gazing around at their homestead, at Virginia babbling happily on her blanket. "I can't believe I ever thought that life was what I wanted." "You couldn't have known," Victor said gently. "You were young, alone, trying to make your way in a hard world. And now," Olivia turned in his embrace to look up at him. "Now you're still young," he said with a teasing smile, "but no longer alone. And the world, while still hard at times, is a little kinder here in our valley." Olivia wrapped her arms around his waist, resting her head against his chest. "I wouldn't trade this life for all of Jenkins' wealth," she said softly. "Not for anything." Victor kissed the top of her head, then bent to scoop up Virginia, who squealed with delight as he lifted her high. "What do you say, little miss? Shall we show Mama the surprise I've been working on?" Intrigued, Olivia followed as Victor led her to the barn, Virginia perched on his hip. Inside, in a corner he'd been mysteriously working on for days, stood a beautiful hand-carved cradle. "Victor," Olivia breathed, running her fingers over the smooth wood, admiring the intricate designs he'd carved into the headboard wildflowers and pine trees, with a small bird taking flight in the center. "It's exquisite." "Thought we might need it," Victor said, a smile playing at the corners of his mouth as he watched her reaction. "Sooner rather than later, from the signs I've been noticing." Olivia's head snapped up, her cheeks flushing. "How did you know? I was waiting to be sure before telling you." Victor laughed, the sound rich and warm in the quiet barn. "You've been sick in the mornings, same as with Virginia. Your dresses are getting snug again, and you've been craving those pickled beets, something fierce." His expression softened. "I pay attention to the woman I love. And you're happy about it?" Olivia asked, suddenly uncertain. Victor set Virginia down on a hay bale and took Olivia's hands in his. "I'm overjoyed," he said sincerely. "A brother or sister for Virginia, another child to love, to teach, to watch grow, another piece of our family." He pressed a gentle hand to her still flat stomach. "Another blessing I never thought I'd have." Tears of happiness filled Olivia's eyes as she covered his hand with her own. "I love you, Victor Northwood." "And I love you, Olivia Northwood," he returned, drawing her into his arms. "More than I have words to express." As they stood together in the barn, their daughter playing happily nearby, the future stretching before them full of promise, Olivia thought back to that desperate day behind the $1 Saloon. How close she had come to giving up hope. How one man's simple act of courage and compassion had changed everything. "Then I'll stand between you and the world," Victor had said, and he had kept that promise in ways neither of them could have imagined. Outside, the wind rustled through the autumn leaves, carrying the scent of pine and wood smoke. Inside their valley, inside the life they had built together, Olivia Northwood knew she had found what every person seeks but few truly find: not just love or safety or belonging, but home in its deepest sense. A place where wounds could heal, where dreams could take root, where a family born of choice rather than blood could flourish. And it had all begun with a pregnant stranger crying behind a saloon, and a cowboy who chose to stand between her and the world.